I'm sorry.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being here at our webinar. We are very pleased to see that so many people of you from all over the world are joining this webinar. My name is Casper Lange. I'm associate professor at the Amsterdam University of Applied Sciences. And together with our initiative members, Gustavo, Tianran, Jonathan, Rio, and Michael, we organized this webinar. Our initiative is called the Lifecycle Thinking for Complex Systems Initiative. And I've been given the honor to guide you through this whole session. Let me first start to give a special thanks to the Luxembourg Institute of Science and Technology for hosting our webinar. This webinar is actually a first in the series of dissemination events that we want to organize within our initiative. And yeah, I will briefly show you our agenda. So first, my colleague Gustavo will start some introduction into the initiative. Then we have three wonderful keynote speakers, Koen van Dam, Tomás, Navarrete, Gutiérrez, and Julien Walzberg. They will present their work. Then we'll have a short break, and after that, we will start an interactive discussion with our keynote speakers in a panel discussion. And you are able to log in using WooClap and ask a few questions, which we will address during the panel discussion. After the panel discussion, we will have some other interactive questions also on WooClap about the initiative and about some research, future research avenues that perhaps you would like to see. Yeah, we'll finish at around 5 to 5 Central European time with some a wrap up and some next steps that we will do. So now I cordially invite Gustavo to give a short introduction into our initiative. Gustavo, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Casper. Can you hear me well? Okay, great. So you please could help me passing the slides when I tell you, that would be great. So hello to all. My name is Gustavo Larrea. I'm a researcher at the Luxembourg Institute of Science and Technology, and I am on behalf of my colleagues, members of the initiative, I'm very happy to welcome you to this first event and thanking you for joining the first initiative event. So before jumping to the presentations, what I want to do today is to give you a brief introduction about this event. Now, I won't be addressing complexity or sustainability because I believe that that will be the core of the following presentations. Instead, I'll just want to give you a little bit of context regarding the organization of this event, but also what's up with this initiative. So basically, the idea of creating an initiative came up from conversations that some members had a year ago in a conference. So it was a pretty nice conference in Leiden. It was an industrial ecology conference, actually. So we were PhD students, very excited, very motivated, working on sustainability, and we were explaining to each other the projects that we were working on, the methods, and all the nerdy stuff. But at the same time, we were discussing some more broader topics, like how can different modeling paradigms, such as agent-based modeling, could contribute to reach some sustainability targets. So the important thing from this discussion was basically that we came up with some realizations. And the first one of these realizations was that we were actually working on similar topics and also encountering similar problems. Well, this was pretty nice to know because somebody else around the world is doing the same thing we were doing. Somehow it was a bit concerning for us because we were thinking that maybe we are duplicating efforts or that we are going through unnecessary struggles, especially when somebody already fixed a problem that you're already having. So we realized that we need to do more collaboration and we need to work on building on existing research. Next slide, please. So now the second realization came up when we wanted to understand how can we build on ongoing research. And this happens because we noticed that we are working with different tools, different protocols, different workflows. So sharing models, sharing pieces of code was very complicated. So definitely, we also realized that we need to arrive to some sort of harmonization in our workflows. Next one, please. Yes, so the final realization came up, well, basically since we are coming from different backgrounds, and also our projects are under different contexts, we noticed that we as researchers were scattered among different academic societies. So in practice, this can be translated on different conferences, different workshops that make the interaction or the constructive interaction more difficult. So we realized that we also need to have some sort of integration among our peers, especially since we have the similar objectives. Next one, please. So after the conferences, after the conference was over, we had some conversations with other colleagues who are developing the same methods and tools, and also who also share the same concerns. And the discussion was enhanced, of course, by the contribution of our colleagues, and that's how the idea of having an initiative was shaped. So next one, please. In this sense, we propose creating an initiative called the Life Cycle Thinking for Complex Systems Initiative. So this initiative is oriented on three main topics. The first one is life cycle thinking as the adequate tool for sustainability research, which implies the usage of methods like life cycle assessment or input-output. The second topic is oriented on complex adapted systems, which it's focused on modeling or at least representing systems as socio-technical systems or techno-ecological networks. And finally, the other topic in which we focus is the methods and the tools that are designed for modeling and analyzing these complex systems, such as agent-based modeling, network analysis, and other sort of computational and simulation methods. Next one, please. This initiative, it's an open initiative that right now I would say that it's quite a multidisciplinary. We have industrial ecologists, computer scientists, social scientists, and also sustainability design scientists. But we are open to receive other types of professionals and other types of researchers as well. Next one, please. We're a young initiative, of course, and we have three main objectives. The first one is to promote the use of complexity-oriented methods in combination with other lifecycle thinking approaches, especially when we are studying sustainability of complex systems. Now, one way of achieving this target is by organizing seminars and events like this one, in which senior or also young researchers can share their research and their work. The second one is to provide a platform to allow the discussion and also the further development of the methods that we use in this field. To reach this, we are hoping to organize workshops and even, if possible, of course, special sessions in conferences with the purpose of boosting the discussion and also boosting the networking among researchers that could eventually lead to some collaboration. Finally, we want the initiative to be a facilitator of communication and dissemination that should go, we believe, beyond unique scientific domains and academic societies. So for these, we are planning to use basically digital tools, newsletter, websites to share information about job opportunities, funding, news, and others. So being that said, I won't take more time. This event is indeed our first tangible effort to set the course and the direction of these objectives. And it's also the kickoff event of the initiative. And I thank you very much for joining. I won't speak anymore. I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you find it very useful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gustavo, for your explanation on this initiative. And we're quite ahead of time, so that's a good thing. So I would like to first introduce our first keynote speaker. We're already going to the keynotes. So our first keynote speaker is Koen van Dam. He's a research fellow at Imperial College London's Urban Energy Systems Group at the Faculty of Engineering, and he specialized in agent-based models for city systems. He utilizes spatial and temporal data from various sectors and scales, particularly energy and transport, providing valuable decision support for designing new services, technologies, and policies. And he works on several national and international sustainability projects and is currently part of the FCDO-funded Climate Compatible Growth Program and the Energy Transition Council of the UK Department of Energy Security and Net Zero. Koen van Dam, I hope I introduced you correctly. I will now stop talking and give the floor to you.
Thank you so much, Casper. Thank you for the kind introduction. Hopefully my screen is visible and voice is clear. Really good to be here. So first of all, congratulations to the team for this initiative. And it's an honor to be asked to be part of this and present a bit about my work here today. But yes, well done to you all, and it's good to hear that so many are attending, and I very much look forward to this discussion with the other panel members and with the audience. So thanks for the kind of introduction. Indeed, Koen van Dam at Imperial College. The Climate Compatible Growth Program is the research program that I'm part of, which is currently funded by the FCDO, Foreign Commonwealth Development Office in the UK. Today I will talk briefly about a number of applications of agent-based modeling in supporting energy transitions in urban systems and in industrial networks, and hopefully give you a flavor of that work and the possibilities there are, and also highlight a number of interesting, hopefully interesting themes for collaboration and for the direction for this field. First, very briefly, I've been asked to talk about modeling, but I don't actually get to spend that much time on modeling at the moment in my role in the Energy Transition Council, which is an initiative launched by the UK for the COP in Glasgow, and is now co-chaired between the UK and the Philippines. A multilateral platform to support countries in the global south with their energy transition, high-level dialogue at ministerial level, all the way down to working groups with technical experts. And part of this platform, we have a technical assistance facility called the Rapid Response Facility, which I help coordinate from a secretariat function. I would love to talk a bit more about these projects, but as you can probably understand in this space, some of it is fairly sensitive, politically sensitive, but we have just published an annual report, which very briefly summarizes some of the projects that we're involved in the member countries and 30 plus technical assistance projects, several of which are about industrial decarbonization and strategies for circular economy, in addition to power networks, etc. So if this is interesting and you're interested in the Global South as an application area, then please have a look at the annual report and we can have a chat on that afterwards. So briefly on motivation, coming back to agent-based modeling and energy transitions, we're looking here at socio-technical systems where human activities lead to demand for services, and that could be households who need lighting in their home or heating, or industrial actors who need to run their processes. So there's services that come from these activities, and there's resources that can be used to meet that demand with a set of technologies and networks to make that happen. Clearly, you're here in this call because you're interested in complex systems and complex adaptive systems and socio-technical systems. So I won't go into too much detail, but hopefully you'll see the good fit with agent-based modeling to address systems like this. We often look at that from a simulation perspective in ABM on the demand side, and then the resources, the technologies, and the networks, or RTN, typically from an optimization perspective. And I'll show some examples of that here. Then looking at sustainability and transitions, we're looking at a transition towards a more sustainable future and look at the impact of various policies to look at different technology options and where you might locate those look at the role of behavior change and incentives for behavior change across all these aspects. So we want to look at the behavior side, at the resource side, at the technologies, and at the network side. And then we may look for cost optimization or minimizing emissions or creating jobs, etc. And in the climate compatible growth program, that's a particular focus where we want to support countries with their energy transition and growing their economy and access to energy, etc. And of course, it's exciting that sustainable options often are also the cost-effective solution for that transition. The transition, of course, involves multiple stakeholders, and you may be familiar with Gilles' theories around that, socio-technical systems and regimes, where we have maybe an existing regime with a mix of technologies and policies and industry and science all set up that is just working as it has for a little while, until something is disrupting that, perhaps in the socio-technical landscape, a crisis like COVID, political events like Brexit or a war, as we've seen in the Ukraine, affecting the overall landscape and possibly creating opportunities for some of the niche solutions to come in. And we might want to build models to test how these niche solutions can take off and become established. And we've seen that in, say, electric vehicles in transport, and are seeing that in renewable power generation too. And that's all done across a number of scales: national, regional, urban, and industrial scale. And I'll very briefly introduce a couple of examples in these across those scales. First, I wanted to look at an urban scale, sustainable transport planning, where with Maya Slagdieva, we looked at Oxford city in the UK and the impact of various policies on the urban sustainable transport. Clearly, we build an agent-based model of the city with different land uses and socio-demographics and travel patterns based on data available in the UK, spatially explicit, and build a synthetic population of people moving around the city: pedestrians, cyclists, and drivers, either local drivers or those coming in from outside the city. And then the agents in the model are the pedestrians, cyclists, and drivers. They make decisions on their destination and on their mode choice, and that mode choice might then be affected by various policies. And that is something that this model could be used to test. And we will then get some traffic volumes, modal splits, and emissions that come out of that. The policy tested here was around traffic filters, blocking certain roads for through traffic, and the installation of a zero emission zone, which limits the vehicles that can go through. And I won't talk too long about the numbers. We can discuss that separately if that's of interest. But the model allowed simulating the impact of such a policy and of infrastructure changes like the traffic filters on the mode choice. And we could see that around 80% of the journeys could be shifted from private vehicle to active transport, which would have a significant reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. And we can see how that maybe also changes over time when agents adjust to that new system and new developments are being built, where policies that may be effective at a certain time could possibly become less effective over time. And as often in these discussions, and they can be quite sensitive around changes in the transport system, does everyone benefit from that? If we can displace traffic, then others might not be too keen on those changes. Again, high level, just to whiz through. Second project I wanted to talk about is around water infrastructure. And I'm just going to talk over a video instead of a slide deck, and hopefully that will play here. This is a project we did a number of years ago from Imperial, working with colleagues in Ghana, in Accra, the Greater Accra metropolitan area, building a decision support tool for infrastructure planning to make that more sustainable and more cost effective, but in this case also to provide wider access to water and sanitation infrastructure. the focus was very much on not us building a model sitting in London and sending over a report, but to build a model that could be used by people on the ground and train them as well. And that capacity building is a significant part of it. Here, I don't know, it's a prototype model, so a lot of the interfaces were text-based, and the interface is around comma-separated value files or JSON files. So none of it is very sophisticated, but it was a way to test this. What we're seeing here is the first step of building a synthetic population and looking at changes of that over time, urbanization patterns, changes in social demographics, and then looking at individuals, their income levels, their access to infrastructure, their location, of course, and then build a number of scenarios building on baseline data and extrapolating from there. Next, we could then simulate a day in that city, in the city of Accra, and look at the demands for drinking water and wastewater produced and the demands for sanitation. So we build a model that would simulate a period of time, 24 hours, and look at the demand for the services. The result of that is a demand for drinking water and wastewater generated, which we could then afterwards visualize, but then also start to optimize in planning, infrastructure investments, new pipelines, new water treatment facilities, etc. And in the context of sustainability, what was very interesting then to also look at, say, waste to energy solutions and the impacts of water and food and energy in an area like this. So we have a prototype model there, a number of papers, which I'll include the links in the slide deck to circulate afterwards if you're interested in looking at that, where we can then optimize over cost or optimize the emissions and find a mix of technologies and pipe networks and locations to have a sustainable solution for this district. A last case study I want to highlight very briefly was done by Shiraz Ansari last year, and a student at Imperial, looking at the transition in industrial clusters in the UK, in particular the Humber cluster, which, as the picture shows here, is the largest emitting cluster, industrial cluster in the UK. Steel industry, cement industry, refineries, and power generation, all closely located. And there we are looking at the emergent behavior of a set of individual businesses, their operation and investments, and their long-term strategies, and maybe willingness to take on some risk as they respond to policies and objectives to be profitable and keep their business going, but also to respond to targets for industry to become net zero. A national government has plans for economic growth and climate policy, which influence that. And what is particularly interesting in the case of industrial clusters is that they are co-located and have shared infrastructure, transport infrastructure, energy infrastructure, maybe carbon capture and storage infrastructure that could be tested. So Shiraz built a model of all the point source emitters in this cluster, looking at the processes that they have, and generate a population in the model that can then simulate investment decisions over the years, either in new technologies to become more cost effective, or to respond to external inputs like prices or carbon prices or emission intensity on the grid, growth in the industry, etc. And then to see how policy measures influence the individual decisions. And then we get solutions per site, and we can see the emergent behavior of the cluster. This was implemented in NetLogo, and some illustrations here over looking at the CO2 emissions over time, depending on when the investment in the carbon capture infrastructure is made. If you wait too long, industries may have already invested in alternatives, and then afterwards that takes longer to have an effect because they need to wait a few years before replacing their new investments. And we could look at the figure below at the hydrogen demand for green hydrogen, depending on different discount rates and prices, which could be incentivized. So the model allows experimenting with different settings for that. Just to wrap up, because I think I'll reach the end of my time quite soon, some of the lessons learned. The outcomes of such a study are always context specific, and that's where building case studies and populating them with local data is important. Solution for transport that worked in Oxford might not work in London or in Paris. A solution for the Humber cluster might look very different for a cluster in South Wales, or even more so overseas. So using local data is very important. Often thought that residential data is easier to access than industrial and commercial data, which to some extent is indeed true, but there are some really valuable global data sets around steel, around cement, around refineries and ports that we can build on in our models. The hardest part we have found is the business decision making. How do businesses decide to invest in alternative technologies, in fuel replacement, etc.? How do they respond to policies, and what risks do they take? And their stakeholder engagement really has been key. And my colleague Nixon Sunny has, for example, in that Humber cluster project, knows a lot of the businesses there and can engage with them. We've also used questionnaires to then populate an agent-based model with the responses of a questionnaire, say around electric vehicle charging behavior, just asking people online questionnaires and then populating the model. And the academic literature clearly is a good starting point, because others may have already analyzed what the decision process in a business or for a household might be. Clearly, spatial data is relevant here. Distances are factors, so GIS data is relevant for populating the model, but also for visualizing. And then a last point here is that not everything has to be done within an agent-based model. When I started agent-based modeling, I wanted to put everything in there, and during my PhD, it was all inside an agent-based model, but more and more looking at combining tools. So for the Humber cluster, a lot of work was done in preparing the alternative technology cost data in, say, Excel, and feeding that into the model. So a lot of almost the decision making around investments was taken out of the ABM and handled in Excel, which was then used by the ABM to create the emergent behavior. AIMS is another good tool for optimization that we have used for technology network optimization. Osmosis and energy systems tool. So do not think everything has to be done with that one tool that you've got in your hand, and working with colleagues with their expertise in other tools is key. A final pointer around CCG, have made available data kits around energy and transport, so especially around the global south. So if that's relevant, have a look. Making data available and sharing that is really helping the modeling community and feed into the decision-making process. And CCG has also set up a large number of open learn courses, including one on agent-based modeling. They are available for free through the Open University, and that might be something to look into or to share with colleagues and see if they can benefit from that. And that's all available. My final slide, and then I'll hand over to you, Casper. With 2 new students this summer, we're looking at 2 new industrial clusters. Humber, going a bit deeper, the work that I presented, and in Nigeria, we're going to look at the Lekki Free Zone. In Wales, we're looking at building on that model that framework that I presented in Ghana. For regional development in South Wales, looking at the urban systems, looking at the industry, and how we can make that region more sustainable by using systems thinking. And then finally, through CCG and the Energy Transition Council, we'll continue support for partner countries looking at energy systems modeling in Kenya and Laos and in India, with a focus on capacity building. And finally, in the pipeline is a review paper on state-of-the-art systems models. And if that's something that you're interested in, or maybe have already worked on or are working on, then please let me know, and there might be an opportunity to work together on that. I'll leave it here, and very much look forward to the other presentations and then the panel discussion afterwards. And that's past, so back to you, Casper.
Thank you very much, Koen, for this very interesting presentation. I'm looking forward to the discussion. I think this will provide a lot of input for the discussion. So everyone in the audience, please make notes so you can put that in the book lab later. Thanks a lot, Koen. Let's go quickly to our next keynote speaker. Our next speaker is Tomás Navarrete Gutiérrez. He is working at the Luxembourg Institute of Science and Technology at the Environmental Research and Innovation Department. And he does a lot of research in agent-based modeling and simulation, computer networks and communications, and computational LCA. And he will now address algorithmic complexity and computational difficulties that arise when agent-based modeling is integrated with LCA. Tomás, we will give you the opportunity to share your slides soon, and then I will stop talking and give the floor to you.
Tomás, we don't hear you.
You're still muted.
You are muted, Tomás.
You are muted, Tomás. I think we have some technical difficulty. We can't hear you. Can you take a look at the audio? Yeah, now we can hear you.
Good, perfect.
It's a bit soft, but
So I'll try to improve my microphone. Let's see if this works better. Where's that part?
We don't hear you, Tomás.
Is it because it's very low or not at all?
well, this is slightly better, but it could be a little bit louder.
Oh, I see. I got the. There. My microphone.
We don't hear you now. It's best if you switch back. Yes, now we can hear something.
Now it seems like there's some sound. No. Yeah, I was trying to, but it's not working.
Now we hear you. Now I hear you.
Okay, it seems like this way it's working better. Is this good? Christelle, is this good for everybody or?
It's okay, we hear you.
Yeah.
Go on.
All right. Good. So I'll start. So I need to share my screen, right?
We see your screen, it's okay. You can
Correct.
put it in presentation mode.
All right. And then my slides right here. Start. And is it all working good? Perfect.
This is working.
All right.
Thanks.
All right. Good. So thank you for the introduction. I am working here with Gustavo, and I want to thank him especially for having invited me to the initiative. I am glad to present now on algorithmic complexity and nature-based modeling for Tomás. And I am a senior research and technology associate at the Luxembourg Institute of Science and Technology. Just 2 words on myself. I am a full computer scientist, and I have been working for 10 years now on sustainability and life cycle assessment. So I have my background on computer science and built my own through work on sustainability. Now, there's a caveat I want to put right here on my presentation. I'm not going to be talking about traditional computer science algorithmic complexity. For those who know a little bit about this, it's about trying to identify how long it takes for an algorithm to complete, depending on how many items you have to sort, for example, for sorting algorithms, but usually known as capital O complexity, lowercase o complexity, Almagraph complexity, and so on. This is not what I am going to be talking about. It's more on how we take into account complexity in the algorithms that we develop for simulation sustainability. But what is exactly complexity, or what is the definition I use to work with complexity? For me, and for a lot of people that gathered in 2009 in a complex systems roadmap created in France, a complex system is just any system that is made of a lot of heterogeneous entities that have local interactions and create multiple levels of collaboration, structure, and organization. With that in mind, how is it that I am interested in using agent models for complexity? Now, to me, it kind of flows naturally because, first of all, agent-based models are computational. They need to be simulated in order to be able to answer questions that they were built for. And this is, of course, because I am basing my work on the definition by Minsky of what is a model. Model is just to an observer B of an object A, something that was built there to answer some questions that we are interested in. Now, models, computational models are simulated, so they could be just a set of equations, or constraints that help to find the answers that we're looking for. And finally, why agent-based, or what is an agent-based model? I am working on the definition from Ferber from 1999, which basically allows a lot of flexibility on what could be an agent. To Ferber, an agent can be a physical or virtual entity that acts, perceives an environment, communicates with others while being autonomous, and has skills to achieve its goals and tendencies. So if we mix up all those different elements, we got agent-based models and simulation. In my presentation, I would first like to talk to you about control of complex systems. And then I have a couple of applications that are directly those parts, and give you some of the current conclusions that I have drawn from all the work on different topics. Good. So let's just start with trying to control a complex system. And I love this image in the background here because complex system may sound or look like this huge console of a lot of knobs and buttons that we could try to tweak to understand it or control it or make it be or sound or work or behave as we want. In my case, I was very interested in trying to control the behaviors of the agents in a specific system. This is experiments I did with peer-to-peer networks. Those of you who were born before the years 2000 might have heard of Napster or BitTorrent and this kind of file sharing network. The idea was, all right, I have this complex system, and every agent there has very different points of view. They know more or less how many people share around them. They know which files, which assets are in the network, but this isn't something they create once and for their own needs. They were already there. And of course, we cannot tamper with the system as much as we want. So we need a model. We need a model to be able to answer the question, how could we control it? Now, of course, this kind of governance of a model is one of the very first hypotheses I work with, which is, all right, I don't want to have the full system working in a way I want, but just some parts of the system. And also, I'm not interested in adding up something to this system internally, but I'm trying to control it from the outside. And finally, of course, the basic hypothesis is agent-based modeling or multi-agent models can be used for modeling such complex systems, as I tried to convince you a few slides ago. Now, the principles of what I did here was trying to build a control architecture, which is exogenous but coherent. That is, it matches the system that we're looking at. We will be using multi-agent simulation in a control loop. That is, we need to observe. Well, let me explain this control loop in a following slide. And finally, the idea is also that we are trying to avoid as much as possible using equations, because this requires having a very deep knowledge of the system in mathematical terms, which is not the case. Now, the control architecture I'm suggesting here is based on more or less this workflow. On the bottom, you have the target system, which has an initial shape. Then as it evolves, it changes. It does not only change the shape by itself, it's more a metaphor for saying the emergent properties of this complex systems evolve over time. For the peer-to-peer networks, you can imagine that this kind of means that during certain seasons, for example, there is a higher rate of people sharing files, and then at the time, I remember maybe when the latest season of a TV series was going out, then more files were being shared and more people were being involved, and so on. So on the bottom, we have this kind of system evolving, and then a control architecture on top of it. We first need to observe, which is what we see on the top, on the extreme left, and different multi-agent models that predict the evolution of the system. Then based on this different evolutions of the predicted by the multi-agent model, we could decide on which could be the best control actions that would allow the control architecture to drive the system to a desired state. This part on the top, those are the control actions in green. This is more or less what I intended to do, and it was implemented, of course, by saying, well, my architecture, if I try to define it, needs something to observe. That is, gather evidence from the complex system. Then I need to be able to use a model to estimate the next states of the system. And for this, I will require simulation. And at the end, if I want to make the system evolve to where I want, I will certainly need to be able to decide which is the best control action for this. Now, it's formalized by using SysML, it more or less looks like this. It's not very important. It's just that we need to be able to state this in a formal system so that we can later on implement it as software. This is basically just an illustration of what I wanted. On the left, you see a peer-to-peer sharing network that has a lot of free riders. There's people who just download files and share, which is, again, maybe a metaphor of a technical system where some people collaborate by sharing or by consuming common goods, and some people just consume but don't share anything. The experimental approach was, of course, trying to say, well, I have a target system with a majority of free riders, so people with antisocial behaviors. But if I have this plus my control architecture, maybe I can drive the system to a majority of sharing peers. Now, I implemented this for the specific case of free riders and file sharing networks, but this could always be applied in abstract terms to any social technical system. That's my opinion. After having done all this experiments and finding that sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work, the very first conclusions that I got was, well, we have an architecture that allows us to explicitly define the questions that we want to address to our model with an equation-free approach and using multi-agent model simulation. Now, as for the specific question of how do we get or produce an influence on the work based on our working hypothesis within the context of control, it seemed to me that a modular approach, as I explained, that has observation, simulation, estimation of future, plus instantiation of models under control actions is a very good way of ending up with a system that behaves as desired. Now, of course, I'm not going to go into the full details of every single experiment that I conducted, but I am available for questions on them. Now, the second application of agent-based modeling, and is now directly related to sustainability that I work with, was about mobility. Now here, the socio-technical system we were interested was the French cross-border commuters who come to work to Luxembourg daily, and their decision to buy a new electric vehicle. In this case, the behavior was not as simple as just sharing or not sharing. It required being able to decide if this was a good option for the cross-border commuter, which was the agent that we were simulating, or which was represented as an agent in our simulation. Now, for this case, it looks like it's very simple, right? You just have to use your car, and then once you have used it, of course, for those of you who are into sustainability, this will have an influence or an impact on the environment in terms of sustainability. This is, of course, influence on the prices of fuel, different incentives to buy electric vehicles, the technical characteristics of the car, as well as the fact that they are not available if it's charged or not. And we could also include other agents, for example, regulators or policymakers. Now, we did this with a more sophisticated behavior of the agents. Now, you cannot see anything here, but this was on purpose. Here, like this, say, this is a little bit more complex as but it looked like this. We have the individual, the first needs to decide if I need or not a new car, and then if he needs or not a new car, then there's another decision taken, and so on, and so on, and so on. Again, I'm not giving all the full details, but I am available later on for questions. So what we could draw as conclusion for this is that it was feasible to couple the lifecycle impact from each of the vehicles aggregated as a fleet, even for complex large systems. Now, the agent-based model here was not just used for scenario elaboration by saying, for example, there are 1,000 cross-border commuters, or the prices of fuel are going to be evolving in this way, and so on, but also to obtain the actual lifecycle inventories that would allow to do actual environmental assessment. We also saw that using just attributional lifecycle assessment of single vehicles cannot be scaled up to be able to take a look at large-scale policies. So we need to have multiple models, because if we only have it for one single model or one single type of cars, it's not going to scale up. The impact of the different policies that we evaluated deploying electrical vehicles have mixed consequences, but this is more or less already well known in the field of sustainability. And finally, we think that with the large amounts of data that are generated by coupling agent-based models and LCA, this could improve the different conclusions that the LCA community can get from models. And for the last application I can share with you here today, we're looking at agriculture. But in this case, we were more interested in evaluating what could be the consequences in the agri-food system of policies, subsidies, taxes, regulation. The difference with the mobility case was that, of course, the life cycle inventories that we would be using were different, not mobility, but production of different crops in Luxembourg in this case. But we were interested in having a clear view of what happens if a certain policy is defined inside our system. For example, the incentive mechanism to increase the area under maize in Luxembourg to produce biofuels. And when you start saying this, we rapidly arrive to the next hypothesis, which is that we need consequential LCA for this. It was already kind of sketched and drafted in the previous conclusion, where we were seeing that single attributional LCA was not enough. So for us, the consequential LCA, which is maybe not the definition you are used to, not just on the different marginal products that can be or not, but it's on identifying the deltas, the changes in terms of the potential environmental impacts induced in the system caused by human-driven actions. That is the policy that is there, or strategic decisions, and not just the marginal product that appears or disappears in the system. We have here the little schema that this designs more or less how this agent-based model coupled with LCA was done. But the important part here is that ultimately we were interested in having policy actions being used as user inputs, and then do simulations and then feed them back to the stakeholders as lifecycle impact indicators. In this case, we built a simulator where the agents were the farmers that had to take a decision of what to plant, and then we forwarded the impacts to software. At the time, we were using OpenLCA, Sima Pro, and by the end of that project, we were using Brightway for the actual environmental impact. The decisions were, of course, change the planted crops, and this was based on the farm size and the rotation, and so on. From these different experiments, we gathered that we have evidence that comes out of the different simulations that we got. But of course, farming needs no more than just the farmers. Then to find price discovery mechanisms, the interactions between the different shocks that could arrive to the system. And of course, if we only take into account crops, it's not enough. To conclude with my presentation with these three different use cases on how to attack complex systems or complexity through agent-based models, we saw that we could be taking a close look at the different levels of a complex system, that is at the agent level, microscopic, at groups of agents at the mesoscopic level, and finally, of course, by aggregating data at the macroscopic level. In the case of agriculture, the macroscopic level will be the total amount of certain crop being planted in Luxembourg was a consequence of the different behaviors and interactions of the agents. Now, this allows, of course, to identify emergent characteristics of the system that were not evident or that were there but could not be explained through agent behaviors. There is one thing that is important, is that even though our simulations may produce results and when we compare them to historical records, sometimes they do not match. But we know that our model is valid because it follows a structure that resembles that of a real system. And finally, we saw that by using this kind of approaches for modeling complexity, we have an experimental approach that allows to test multiple hypotheses on behaviors or scenario conditions. I hope this was clear enough to make you have a lot of questions later on. This is all from my side, and I now hand the control. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tomás, for your interesting presentation on the technicalities and complexities of modeling complex systems. Yes, again, my question to the audience is to keep track of the questions that you have so you can later ask them through WooClap and we can discuss them together with Tomás. Thank you. So let's continue to our third and final keynote speaker for today. I will share my screen. And Julien is already on screen. Welcome, Julien. Thanks for being here. Let me first introduce you. Julien is our final keynote speaker, and he is a researcher from the Strategic Energy Analysis Center of the National Renewable Energy Laboratory in the United States. Thanks for being here. I understand it's quite a difficult time to be here in the US because of the hour of the day. Julien currently works on research on agent-based modeling and sustainability and the circular economy, including the integration of agent-based modeling and simulation with life cycle assessment. So he will talk about his advancements and insights regarding this topic. Julien, again, thanks for being here and for providing us your presentation. I will give the floor to you now.
Right. Thanks, Casper. Can you all hear me all right?
Yes, I can hear you. And
Okay, perfect.
if you put it in presenter mode, yes, perfect. Thanks.
Right. Hi, everyone. So yeah, I'll talk today about agent-based modeling and simulation for the circular economy. So when I joined NREL as a postdoc, they just started doing research in the circular economy space. And because it's the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, what they're interested in particular is knowing how can we make renewable energy even more sustainable by designing PV, designing wind turbines, and all of those technology with materials that are better for the environment than currently. So you may well know that in the next decades, the demand for raw material is expected to increase by a lot for photovoltaics, for instance. Right now, according to the circular economy report, we consume about 100 billion metric tons of materials each year, and that's projected to be 177 by 2050. So this increases the risk posed by potential supply chain restrictions. So when we think of all the critical minerals that are needed for those clean energy technologies, we know that they're not necessarily coming from within the US, and so there may be potential supply chain restriction that happen where suddenly we cannot build the technology that we want, or maybe the prices are very high, so that pose some issues. And so at first, when NREL was looking at that circular economy topic, they were focusing a little bit on that. But quickly, we also thought about, yeah, well, the circular economy can also help decrease GHG emissions that are embodied in our materials, as well as the energy that's embodied in those materials, and the transportation that's needed to get those materials from different countries. So how would the circular economy do that? You may be well aware that the goal of the CE or circular economy is to spur material efficiency. So by reusing, for instance, product or recycling them at the end of life. So there are four main concepts behind the circular economy. The first one being to narrow the flows, so just use less materials in the first place. Slowing those flows, so use those materials and products for longer. Also using regenerating flows, so using biofuels or biomaterials, renewable energy, so make our products and our components cleaner. And finally, when we count, and that's kind of following a hierarchy of from supposedly better to the environment to the best for the environment to the least best. And so the last one is cycling flows, so reusing, recycling, and all of that. So I'm gonna try to get rid of this little panel because, oh no, what did I do? Oh no, am I still showing my screen? Sorry about that. Oh, here is how I can.
I think we can still see your screen.
Yeah, but I can't see it. So what did I do? How can I? Oh no, this is not. Sorry about that.
Don't worry.
Get out of here. Oh, here we go. Okay.
Okay.
So, thinking about the circular economy and hearing about the talks, the previous talks, I think you all have an idea right now that techno-economic solutions are, of course, necessary. We need innovation to get us where we want in terms of our sustainability goals. and our circularity goals, but it's not necessarily sufficient. So we need also to change our behaviors. So both consumer behaviors, but also organization behaviors. So the way that we consume and we produce stuff. And when we think of life cycle assessment, when we try to assess the environmental benefits of all our technologies and all our new business models, circular business model, and so on, with LCA, with life cycle assessment, we need to think about those potential change in behavior. So the circular economy in particular needs those change in behavior, because it's not the same when we drive our own car than when we do a ride sharing, or when we rent a hotel room than when we rent an Airbnb. It's a little bit different ways of consuming and producing services and products. So a better modeling of this behavior can inform when the circular economy systems are truly beneficial. Another notorious example for LCA is information and communication technologies. They really depend on how we behave. So when you think about just your phone, your cell phone, someone might charge it very often and use it very often, and another person might not use it that often. So there's not going to be the same number of charging. Maybe one person can use it until it's pretty much broken, and another one might want to change more often. So all of those things we need to account for if we want to be very realistic in our assessment. So how do we model behavior? That's a whole can of worms. We can use recent advances in economics, at least, so that can help us out. Two recent Nobel Prizes in economics, Daniel Kahneman and Richard Feller, have done a lot of work regarding human behaviors. So we know that those behaviors are not necessarily rational, so we don't always maximize some sort of utility function that we have within ourselves. Those behaviors are heterogeneous, so I don't behave the same way that my parents are behaving or my neighbor. Those behaviors are also constrained. So if I don't have a car, I have to take public transportation. I don't really have a choice, or I have to bike or something. If I have a car, I have more choices regarding my commute. And those behaviors evolve as well. We don't necessarily always behave the same way during our life. And I really like this quote from Richard Feller and Cass Sustain. Homo economicus, according to economists, Homo economicus can think like Albert Einstein, store as much memory as IBM's Big Blue, and exercise the willpower of Mahatma Gandhi. But real people have trouble with long division, and they sometimes forget their spouse's birthday, and they have a hangover on New Year's Day. So we don't always make the best choices for ourselves. So now, how do we model this? When we think of industrial ecology tool, we very often can use life cycle assessment, input-output analysis, material flow analysis, all of those sort of tools. But more recently, those tools have started to be combined with agent-based modeling, discrete event simulation, system dynamics, or even operational research, tools that are more in the sphere of complex system science. And ABM has a lot of advantages to model complex system, as we've already discussed that in the previous presentations. So I won't go too far into this. We have some agents that can make decisions. Agents can represent pretty much anything we want, so an organization, an individual, a household. The advantage is that we can represent heterogeneity and also how those agents influence each other. Now, what I've been using to model decisions a lot is social psychology studies. So there are a lot of theories of behavior change out there. You can see on the graph there, there are about more than 83 theories of behavior change. Some of them are more popular than others, so they've been cited by other theories, and they've been cited more often. So typically the theory of planned behavior, the self-efficacy theory, or the health belief model are some of the most used theory of behavior change. And the one that's particularly used in the context of agent-based modeling is the theory of planned behavior that strives to explain human behavior according to three main factors: the attitude toward the behavior. So somebody might be more inclined, might be a little bit more environmentally conscious than someone else, so maybe more willing to recycle or do some other environmental behavior. Subjective norms is how we influence each other. So if I see my neighbor has bought a new barbecue, maybe I'm gonna buy a bigger one or something like. Also, my neighbor has put solar panels. I'm like, oh, that looks nice. I might put some on my rooftop as well. And finally, perceived behavioral control. So how difficult is the behavior in question? So do we have all of the means that we need to perform the behavior? Is that expensive? Does it require a lot of thinking and all of these sort of things? It has been used a lot recently in industrial ecology study to explain behaviors, and especially in the context of waste management as well. So lots of ABM have been used to study circularity. We published a paper summarizing some of them. And so just an example of how we can use agent-based modeling for the circular economy. We can have agents that are going to perform some type of behavior, such as recycling waste, or putting it in the trash. And then we can combine them with life cycle assessment. So recycling the waste is going to have less environmental impact at the end of considering the full life cycle than when we putting the waste in the trash. So what have we been developing is what I've called the circular economy agent-based model. Didn't have a lot of inspiration when I came up with that name, but anyway, basically we applied that model to 4 case studies, one on hard disk drives, how to reuse hard disk drives rather than recycle them, because there's lots of value in those HDDs. PV recycling, wind blades recycling, and finally PET bottles. So what we were trying to answer are what are the technical, economic, and market conditions that can maximize value retention and minimize raw material input when we apply different circular economy strategies. And so looking at both energy generating and energy consuming technologies. So in the CABM, we're trying to represent about 6 types of agents. So we have recyclers, we have asset owners that own a particular technology, so a PV, or maybe hard disk drives or something. We have recyclers that are gonna potentially recycle the waste. We have landfill that are gonna just bury the waste and forget it. We have service providers that have sort of like an intermediary role between the other agents. Then we have, of course, the original equipment manufacturers, but also other type of manufacturers, because we may have downcycling that's happening, where the product is going to be recycled, the material is going to be recycled in a different application. And finally, we also wanted to represent regulator agent that can enact some incentives or regulation to improve recycling. So the model is implemented in Python using the Mesa library. That's a library specifically designed to build agent-based model. So it's very easy to use and has a lot of value. Networks library to build the social network within our different agents. One agent, those are a little bit maybe too much details, but I think what's very interesting there is that the Mesa library is built in a way that's make it very easy to add different type of agent within the model. So we can start with maybe just the recycler and the asset owner and start with a very simple model, and then we can add very easily other type of agent as we start to think a little bit more on how we should represent the system accurately. So this is basically this equation here represent the decision, how the agents are making decision at end of life. So they're gonna decide between different end of life pathways, such as repairing, reusing, recycling. Maybe they're gonna store the waste for some time in their home. So if we think of electronic waste, typically, we may just put it somewhere and wait until we finally make a decision on hopefully putting it somewhere where it should be, which is in some sort of recycling program. And we have also a webull function here that's going to generate the waste amount in our simulation. So typically, in one of the example on the wind case study, we were able to represent all of the different wind farms within the US, so about 1,300 wind farms, and we were able to represent how the wind farm owner would make decision regarding the decommissioning and the end of life management of the wind blades that are pretty difficult to recycle right now. So distances were a very important parameter here because wind blades are huge. So even if you cut them in smaller pieces on site, it still takes trucks and special transportation permit and everything to transport the decommissioned blades to a recycling facility or landfill. So we were looking at, well, what if we shred the blades on site in smaller pieces, in very, very small pieces, so that we can use smaller trucks and don't have to ask for special transportation permits and things like that. That's another detail on some other decision tree for the recycler. So we model a learning effect. So the more the recycler get their hand on end of life products, the more they can decrease the cost of recycling. And also, depending on the exact recycling process, we can recover more or less materials at end of life. So I'm just gonna focus on one set of results from our ABM on PET bottle recycling. So the recycling rate in the US has plateaued. It's not as good as it could be, especially when you compare it to Europe. But recycling behaviors are very contextual, so it's hard to come up with one size fits all solution. So the question here was, how can we encourage recycling behaviors? And what we used was an ABM that accounts for different factors that influence household decisions to put their waste into their PET bottle into the recycling bin rather than in the trash bin. So we are accounting for attitudes toward the behavior, the social norms, the distance that needs to be traveled. So if we have a curbside recycling program, the distance is pretty much 0. But if the household has to drive to a drop-off center, then that's going to also affect the decision. Do they own a bin at home to put the PET bottle in? One very important parameter we haven't accounted yet, but that's actually make a difference, is that you can very often you have a recycling bin in your kitchen, but you don't necessarily have a recycling bin in your bedroom or in your bathroom, and so that's also can, of course, influence the recycling rate. Another interesting aspect of this model is that we accounted for wish cycling, which is basically we're thinking it's a PET bottle, but maybe it's not, or we're thinking it's like, are we putting a PET bottle that's soiled, and so it's gonna actually make things worse if it's like full of, I don't know, a sauce or something that's not great. Or they put even like some other type of material in the recycling bins that just should not be in there because it's not gonna get recycled, and it just contaminates the bales in the material recovering facilities. So, another very interesting aspect in this model is that we accounted for also the habits forming. So we made it more difficult for agents to actually, if they were putting the PET bottle in the trash, we made it very difficult to actually change the behavior and putting in the recycling, just because you have to break out the habit that you formed in the past. And same thing, once you start putting it in the recycling bin, you also need to do it several times in order to form a new habit. So all of this to study some behavioral interventions to improve the recycling rate. So just a couple examples of what it could be. A behavioral intervention could be cart inspector that's gonna literally open the recycling cart within a neighborhood and look at what's inside and put a little note on the cart saying, oh, you shouldn't have put this product or this material in there, or oh, thumbs up, you did a really good job. Another example is that if you provide the means to perform the behavior, obviously you're gonna get a better performance rate for your behavior. So this is the example of Montreal, where they started putting, starting some composting programs where they actually provided composting bins to households in Montreal. So obviously, yes, am I talking too much?
Sorry, we are almost through our time. We are through our time,
Okay.
actually. So could you make some final remarks? Thanks.
Yeah, I'll just show some of the results. I guess this one is more interesting, is that when we looked at two different behavioral intervention, and you can see that they don't necessarily affect the different counties the same. So one of the behavioral intervention has more of a distributed effect, and another one has less distributed and more targeted towards certain counties. And I just want to say, before my time's over, please go look at a little tutorial I made on how to combine agent-based modeling in LCA. Very simple how to learn that. I presented that at ACLCA here in North America. Sorry for spending too much time, and this is the end of my talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Julien. Sorry to interrupt you. It was a very inspiring talk, and I really enjoyed it. But yeah, we also have to keep track on time. So thanks a lot for your presentation. We go on with a very short break. I think we should keep it a bit shorter than planned. So let's be back within 3 minutes. In the meantime, you can also already go to the wooclap.com website and to the event code ZGGZRD, or you can use your phone and scan the QR code, so we can start our panel discussion soon. I will be back in, well, 2 minutes now. Okay. So we are back after this very short break. Yeah, we keep it a bit shorter because we are really eager to talk to all our panel members. So let's continue to our panel discussion. You can still enter the Whoop Clap page, and I will now shortly share my screen to show what questions will pop up. In the meantime, I kindly ask the panel members to show themselves on the screen on the webcams so we can see them. And I'll start off with some questions that I prepared. Hi there, Koen, Julien are there. Is Tomás still there? Well, we'll just start off with the first question to Koen. Hi there, Tomás. Thank you. Koen, based on the presentations by Tomás and Julien, do you have any reflections to their findings, to their key findings, and perhaps how it might help you in your further research?
I can't hear you anymore. I'm sorry.
Yeah, thanks, Casper. Very much enjoyed those two presentations, Tomás and Julien. Thanks, and congratulations on that excellent work. And I think really good to see these three talks. Hopefully, for the audience, has been helpful to see the breadth of the research in this field, but also some common themes, I think, which we can hopefully address here. I very much liked in Tomás's talk and some ways going back to basics and why are we modeling, how are we setting up the model, and some really helpful literature references as well that I think will be of use for people just getting started in this field. Models useful when us answer certain questions. I very much like that, and it's certainly good to keep in mind when we are building models and realizing that we can't model them perfectly, but they might still be useful. In your talk, Tomás, I think the free rider concept, I'd be interested in discussing that with you at some point, also how that may be linked to decisions, say, in an industrial cluster where you have decision makers who have to invest, but who's going to be the first mover, who is going to wait and maybe take advantage of investments that others have made, actions that others have made, and perhaps there are benefits to being first, but maybe there are also benefits to being last when others have already shown the way, and maybe some of the technology is proven and becomes cheaper and you can just jump in. So maybe that concept, if I understood it correctly, could be interesting to see how behaviors change and how they are dependent on each other, and not everyone will be cooperating to get that common good in the system, and that's hard to enforce because they're all individual decision makers. So that concept I thought was very useful. Something that I saw actually in both your talks, Julien, too, that you looked at an ABM and feeding the outputs of an ABM into an LCA. And I'm wondering if it's worth looking at that the other way around as well, where the LCA outcomes influence some of the decisions that agents have in investing in a new vehicle or testing a policy or switching fuel in an industrial process. If they would have LCA analysis as an input to the decision rule, maybe the carbon intensity of certain options, I think that would be nice. And I think you both showed that direction from an ABM to an LCA, and clearly very helpful to do that assessment of different scenarios. But I'm wondering if you could look at that going the other way also. If I may, Casper, maybe a last comment on Julien's talk as well. I hope to mention that earlier that the CCG program, Climate Compatible Growth, also has a work stream on critical minerals. I'm in the system design work stream, but colleagues are working on that. So I'm happy to make some introductions if that is useful. Your slide with the different theories of behaviors. It's a nice one. There's many theories, and I'm wondering, how do we decide which one is best applicable to the case that we are working on? Is it the simplest one that will allow us to model something quickly? Well, maybe that's the way forward, but maybe some models are better suited to others. And clearly a lot of overlap in thinking there too. Are those theories applicable to households or also to industry or private sector, public sector stakeholders? So lots, I think, to cover and lots to discuss. And maybe a last point, I hope that it's useful for this community and to share the resources also on the tools used and manuals or tutorials, as you have done, and relevant literature reviews. So I mean, maybe that could be a function of this network as well, to share those things and make that available and help people get up to speed. I think that those are my first reflections on the again, really enjoyed that.
Thank you, Koen. Tomás, do you have any reply or any reflections on that?
Sure. Well, the free rider problem is, of course, very, very good. Typical of things that happen in society that are not just file sharing, right? The whole tragedy of the commons problem. We have things that as a society we're building, and we need to participate in a society, not just because we pay taxes and we are somehow entitled to benefit from what is being done with taxes, but also because we are social animals, right? We cannot really accept for various cases through history. We are actually programmed to live in society, right? Now, when the societies get more and more sophisticated and create little subgroups like what you were just saying, it's like industrial landscapes, right? Where everybody is doing sometimes parks. The importance of building industrial parks is that some of the waste is being reused as inputs for others and so on. But then this is already a subsystem, a different techno-social system by itself, and the intricacies of money, as you were saying, is starts to play a major role. So it's not anymore about just decisions and behaviors, but economics. And I'm still very let's say it. It's just exactly like sometimes people who have been working with mathematical models tend to distrust simulation models by saying, but there's nothing formal about it. I have more or less the same impression of economic modeling, because if economic modeling was, economic modeling as based on statistics or mathematical models, whether it's just for linear algebra or differential equations or any other. If those models were as valid as they claim or as perfect as one could think just because it's math, we wouldn't have had 2008, or we wouldn't see all these crazy things happening in economy that nobody had foreseen. Just is impossible. Even if you had the best equations behind it, you cannot foresee every single possible scenario. So my take on how could we be using agent-based modeling as a complexity approach for industrial symbiosis, I think is we should give it a try, as long as it helps us to answer the right questions. Sometimes the question can be easier and as valid by using statistics or mathematics, because we don't care about the microscopic level or the mesoscopic level. All we care about is the macroscopic level, right? Even if this is complex, but sometimes the surrogate models or simpler models from math, well, for instance, they don't take into account complexity, can be used as and be better suited than agent-based modeling. That is my first take. And the second take is the good thing about agent-based modeling is that Even if it may have a harder time answering some of these questions than simpler, faster models, equation-based models, agent-based model can very also incorporate life cycle assessment because it's natural. It can just be added to the model. And maybe I am jumping here to another question. In saying we can have a multi-modeling approach and not just consider agent-based model, but we could have input-output modeling and mix it all in one society of models or a big family of models that have different natures that can communicate with each other just because they are computational, and we can easily drive the inputs of one to become the outputs. No, the outputs of one to become the another one. That is what I think. But of course, the free-rider problem, as a prototypical tragedy of the commons example, is very useful to find what could be done.
Thank you, Thomas. So Julien, you were also talking about the behavioral aspects, and well, we mentioned the economic aspects, of course, but behavior is very important, and agent-based models and complexity thinking is very important to say something about that. To what extent do you think that your findings in circular economy, in modeling circular economy, are applicable to, for example, the transport sector, energy sector, that Koen and also the agricultural sector that Thomas mentioned? To what extent is that all exchangeable, these findings, or are these findings kind of, or the methodologies usable in a way? Can you comment on that a little bit, Julien?
Yeah, I think just to following on what Thomas has said, I think since the dawn of time, probably we've tried to understand how we behave ourselves, right? And even the ancient Greek and philosophy and everything is trying to understand our world and also us and what we do. And so economic theories are very useful sometimes, but social psychology theories are also very useful. They're different way of looking at the same issue, but both of them are not fully grasping. I think it's so complex that we'll always be short of accurately modeling human behaviors. It's something that's tremendously difficult. Maybe once we have quantum computers or like things that can account for, like thousands and thousands and thousands of factors and like characteristics, because like I said, we're all different. So just to answer your question, I do think that the way that I approach the issue for the circular economy can for sure be applied to the transportation, agricultural, or energy sector. It's going to be maybe slightly different models, slightly different factors. And most importantly, it also depends on the research question that you're trying to answer. So, at the end of the day, we funded to do research, so we have to find the tools that are the best suited to answer whoever's funding us questions, right? So, but yes, there is no reason why it couldn't be applied to our systems.
Okay, thank you, Julien. I would like to start to go to the questions, because many questions are actually coming in here. Well, I will just start with the question that also received a lot of likes, because apparently those questions are really important to the audience. So the question that got 9 likes was, what are the common challenges when coupling the supply side and the consumption side in an ABM LCA model? Perhaps can I give this question to you, Koen, or does Julien or Thomas want to react first? Koen?
Maybe Thomas and Julien have
Okay.
more hands-on experience on that, so maybe they could start first, and happy to jump in afterwards.
Okay.
Unless you have some more general comments, but yeah, maybe Thomas and Julien.
That's fine.
Yeah, thanks.
Julien, I saw you nod a little bit.
I nodded to, I nodded thinking to myself, I don't really know how to answer this question.
Ah,
But
okay, it's a very difficult question.
What I can say is that I haven't focused that much on the supply side, to be honest. I've really mostly focused on the consumption side of things. So that's one issue. What I've done very simply in the case of reusing solar panels, for instance, I had two decision trees, right? One decision tree was, do I buy a reused panel or a new panel? And do I buy, and then the second decision tree was, do I sell my panel for reuse or do I recycle it or landfill it? And so in the model, I had to make sure, I had to write some lines of code to make sure that I couldn't sell more solar panel if there was no demand, right? So, and people who, and on the other hand, if I had too many people wanting to buy reuse but not enough panels, that couldn't occur ever. So I had to match those two sides of things just through lines of codes. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I think I will go on with some next question, just to also address the audience's needs. So one other question is, how do you use stakeholder participation in modeling? And I think it's one of the things, now I try Koen again, because it was one of the things that you mentioned, right? So perhaps you can say something more on that.
Yeah, I think there's maybe two parts of that in my mind. One is before or while you are building the model to get input from potential end users or from domain experts, which, to be honest, as a modeler, we're not always the domain expert too. So working with other parties there, getting their input in the design of the model, as well as in data sets and validation process. So while building the model, personal connections are helpful there. Sometimes we have experts within the university that we can just go to another building on campus and sit down with a domain expert. Sometimes we have long collaborations with private sector parties where we can ask them questions and they can ask us questions, and that's really like a co-design process, which is my preferred way of working around that. Second part, I think, is after a model, or at least an initial version of a model has been completed, is then to get people together to discuss the outcomes or scenarios that come out of a model. We organized a workshop where we demonstrated the scenarios on the screen with people in the room who would possibly be agents on that screen or having some say in the direction of the energy transition. And just to show, if we take this assumption, then this is a direction the system might go. If we change that assumption, then it might look like this. And then just ask them, how would that affect your thinking? What additional scenarios would you like to see? Ideally, I would like to have models that you can then adjust fully on the fly with the feedback from stakeholders, and to some extent you can do that. But I mean, that having that more adjustable and almost real-time feedback to discussions would be great. But even just having a set of simulation runs prepared and a slide deck and maybe a video of the simulation and then discussing that is very beneficial. And that could be done with key decision makers in infrastructure planning, but we've also done that with just with residents to show a model of their neighborhood and ask them, like, how would you want this neighborhood to be improved? What are the things that you're missing? And then to go back home to our offices and try to implement some of those scenarios and feedback. So I think in those two stages, and ideally, that's almost like a continuous process where you co-design and co-use that with stakeholders. Not easy, but that's the way that we can get impact and have buy-in as well, because people may not like it if you just show up like, oh, I've spent 3 years working on this model, here's the result. It's different from, we've been working together for a couple of years and now here's what we have designed together. the acceptance of that is very good.
Mhm.
Hopefully others have similar experiences, but that's a nice process. And co-design also means that we can answer any questions and maybe even train people up to understand better what the model can do and cannot do and how to use it in going forward.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so I think this is quite interesting. Do you also see like conceptual modeling as one of the means to help building the digital model as well? And especially when you're talking to stakeholders that are not that familiar with coding and with computers?
Yeah, diagrams of BMPF flow charts and things are very useful in trees, as others have mentioned as well. Pseudocode can be another way of addressing that, where you can write down an algorithm without all the complicated, distracting brackets and semicolons that somebody might find harder to interpret. But yeah, that's good. And of course, Thomas talked about that extensively earlier too. Nice to see that. Yeah, the theory of how you embed that complexity in the model. Design is key. Yeah, it's communicating that is good, and I think that's useful for documenting and writing academic papers as well, to be able to show what that behavior looks like.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Let's take a look at another question. There is one question. A lot of computational tools have been mentioned, but no coupling methodology. Are there any insights to combine ABM with SD, LCA, and others? This is quite a challenging question, but perhaps we can also talk about, your insights or your experiences with coupling ABM with other modeling methods. It was just mentioned also by Tomás. Perhaps you could say something about that, Tomás?
Yeah, sure. I'm just about to, I will try to look for the back reference. I know, for example, that work, you can find work in the literature on the modeling domain, let's say, which is an abstract way of saying, if I don't take into account the real nature of the models, I should be able to couple one model. There is, and this can be found in literature, right? So it's not like nobody has ever thought about it. It's just that we have so many domains of application of modeling, so many types of models. We're talking about agent-based models, multi-agent models, of course, life cycle by its own is modeling, right? Because it's a way of representing an object B to be able to answer some questions that we have about it, but that we cannot directly tamper with. Most of the questions being indicators and metrics. So literature already has, I wouldn't say abundant, but some means of formally describing how to couple model. Most of the time, this comes, or the literature talks about differential equation modeling, because it's easy, right? You just have to go back to the same language, math, and in particular to way of describing differential equations. Now, this is one type of model, but what if you start adding simulation models, or hey, let's go crazy, 3D models, right? Like you actually have a 3D model you need there, right? You have your GIS configuration and settings and so on that will give you some information about the system you want to model. The one challenge that I have myself modeling approach by using models of different natures, not just the same type, like questions, dynamics, is that when you have time involved, and it is important, it is very hard to synchronize the model. How do you know, or how do you evaluate the output of your model at a given point in time, knowing that this point in time is the same for everybody? That is, how do you run a simulation while at the same time running an equation that is supposed to give you the answer of that model in the same time step? Is your differential equation also given time steps, or is it should be found by month, by week, by day, by action, and so on. So this is one big challenge, even though there is in the literature formal approaches to coupling models. I think that agent-based modeling plus other models is still something that requires a lot of attention in multi-modeling space. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Julien or Koen, do you have any final remarks on this, or?
Very briefly, I think often it's also on soft coupling different pieces of software, and maybe some manual processes involved in getting outputs from one model into another model. Having consistent, well-defined data formats helps for that. Being consistent with units, etc. Just a thought that came to me while I heard you talk there, Thomas, also is maybe there's a role for AI in translating data sets from one format to another. Say, here's a table that we need to configure in a slightly different way so that I can load it into another file. Maybe there's tools that can do that for us, and be trained to convert that into another language, or just data formats, if we have the well-defined standards for that. I think this is also better coupling tools. The more you build software yourself, the more control you have over that. If you use more off-the-shelf tools, then you may just have to use their data outputs and process that and load that into another piece of software. But if you build your own in Python or Java more from scratch with libraries, then feeling is that you'd have more control over that coupling as well.
Okay, thank you. I'm actually looking at the time, so time is going quite quickly. We have received many questions, and yeah, unfortunately we aren't able to all address them. But what we will do is collect all these questions and share them on the slides also with our audience. Well, later on at the end of this seminar, we will provide some opportunities to contact us and perhaps work further on these questions outside of the context of this webinar. So I think we have to go further to the next item. We would like to ask the audience about the application areas of their research. We have 3 questions to them. So yeah, we have some insights in who is attending today. Yeah, we will also ask them about some other challenges that they might face in their research. And also the last question will be about how do you see our role as an initiative in furthering the field. Let's see if we can go to the next question. I see that you cannot vote anymore. 1 second. Let's see if we can go back. We have some technical difficulties here in the voting. Well, in the meantime, we can still discuss a little bit further. Julien, I would like to ask you a question. And in the meantime, on the background, we start to fire up the voting system again. Julien, for you, a question about your research on circular economy. We all know that, well, also you address it in your talk. Recycling is quite an issue among the public, So yeah, how can we actually use agent-based modeling and LCA combinations to actually help making circularity happen in the real world?
Hello, now it's working.
The voting is already working, but perhaps Julien, please feel free to answer the question.
Yeah, I think it's making it easier, I think, is important, and making the one very big issue with plastics is that the plastic manufacturers, to be very honest, have not been very good. And they sort of lied when they said that they invented this little circle triangle with the number, which doesn't really mean that it's necessarily recycled, especially in the US, because some materials have the triangle, but we don't have the recycling capacity to do so. So I think being true to what can go in the bin and what cannot is very important, and more education regarding that.
So you think with participatory modeling or showing how the models work, that helps educate the people in, yes, okay. Yes, so we, the audience has started voting. I see a lot of answers on agricultural systems, transport, LCA, circular economy, health, all kinds of different fields of expertise. So this is very interesting to see how many people attend and how various fields of expertise attend this this seminar. LCA is in the middle. Industry, assessment, circular economy, footprints, energy, techno-economics. Do we see somewhere? I'm wondering if we see
Causality.
behavior as well. But this is really interesting because here we can really see how we can try and help each other learn about all these topics. So this is amazing to see how many different fields of expertise are there. I think it's time to go to a next one. So let's have another 20 seconds and then we go to the next question. So if the audience feels to share the last thing, then we go to the next one. It's still evolving. Okay. This is already the next question. So what challenges do you face in your research addressing life cycle thinking and complexity? So this is a different question. So please fill out your answers regarding challenges that you face in your research and perhaps challenges that we can address also with this initiative. Involving stakeholders, modeling, yes, that's always hard, of course. Many tools, okay. I think it's about what tools to choose. Is it trustworthy? Yes, it's also addressed, like, is the model trustworthy? How do we validate the model and inconsistencies? Qualitative data versus quantitative. How do we use qualitative data? I saw accounting. Occam's razor. Yeah, that's interesting because that tells us something about simplicity, and we are talking about complexity here. Human behavior, yes, that's a very difficult one.
And a very nice song by Björk.
Sorry, Tomás? And a very nice one?
I said it's also a very nice song from Björk.
Uh-huh. Learning. Overall implications of impact. Okay, this is quite also very broad question. So it's very nice to see how people wonder how this integration of complexity and LCA can help them out. Okay, let's move on to the last question. If my people on the background can help me out, go to the last question.
It's very broad, but
one earlier.
You can recognize quite a lot of these things as well. So it's probably more common ground rather than the diversity, different needs. So
that's true.
I could have answered myself too. It's very nice to see.
Yeah, that's correct. So the last question is, which future activities of the initiative are you interested in? Please select as many options as you would like to participate. And we have a webinar with ongoing research presentations, a bit like this one, face-to-face workshops, special sessions in related conferences, co-authoring papers, co-development of methodology, tools, data, platform, co-developing research funding proposals, always interesting, of course, for the researchers, facilitating research visits and recruitment, and the last one is email lists for exchanging information. Of course, if you have any other ideas outside of these 8 topics, you are welcome to contact us. We will share our contact details, of course, in the last slide, and we will also provide some follow-up on this webinar in which you can answer a survey. So if you have any other ideas, you can still provide them through the survey that we will share after this webinar. But this one will already provide some ideas, so we can see that many people are interested in webinars with ongoing research presentations. 82% currently. Co-development of methodology, tools, data, and platform. Also quite high on the agenda. I think that's quite interesting as well. That was one of the main reasons that were already mentioned by Gustavo in the beginning of the session, why we wanted to come together. Email list for exchanging information, yes, for the network. Which ones? Yeah, and then we have facilitating research visits and special sessions, also 48%. Okay, great. Thanks a lot for all your inputs. So actually, we are now looking at the time. We have not enough time, but I would like to have Gustavo give some final remarks on this webinar. And then
let me hijack for 1 minute the microphone. I just want to remind the audience that two important remarks. First is that we are going to send a survey very shortly after this webinar is done. Please answer it. It's going to help us a lot to improve. At the same time, we'll start to use a mailing list. So please, if you can register in that mailing list, it will be nice. The idea is that we'll be able to share newsletters, future events, also job opportunities. We want to share some job opportunities for doing ABM and LCA as a puzzle position in ULB in Brussels with ETH. We don't have time to talk about the position right now, but we're going to send it through email for the people that are interested. So please register your email in the mailing list so we can all be updated. And more things might come, and just check your email. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, then it's 5 o'clock sharp, so I will wrap up a little bit. I first want to thank all the contributors to this event. First of all, the keynote speakers, of course. Thanks a lot for all your presentations and your helpful insights during the discussion. yeah, we appreciate it very much. Thanks a lot, and we hope to stay in touch, of course, on follow-ups. We also would like to thank List, of course, for supporting this and hosting this seminar with their software and with their support team. So thanks a lot to them. I would personally like to thank the co-members of the initiative, yeah, for helping setting up this seminar and all their ideas. And of course, lastly, I would like to thank you, the audience, also for attending this webinar and for contributing to our lively conversations and to the WOOC Lab. At the top of our event, we had 106 participants. So that is quite a good score, and we can also see, based on the WOOC Lab results, that there are many people from different fields of expertise. So we have a rich pool of people that can help each other with their own knowledge and expertise. So that having said that, I'd like to finish now because we're 2 minutes over time, and I wish you well, I hope to see you during some next events, and I wish you a very nice day and a very nice weekend. Thank you very much. Bye bye.
Bye bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye bye.